Hi everyone, it's Raya and welcome to Anteli BOM Month, Month 7. Today we're going to be making 8 of block chase and we will be using F2, F3, F5 and F7 fabrics. You may recall that during month 4 we made very similar block, so this will be kind of a refresher from that month. Let's get started. This month we're going to be learning how to use V-block trimmer, which looks like this. It is by Studio 180 Design. And then we're going to be using Taco Trimmer 1. So why don't you take fabric F5 and we're going to be using the 2.5 inch strip. And I have already cut one of the squares. It measures 2.5 by 2.5. And you will need 8 of these. So let's go to step 2, and you will be needing to cut F2 and F3 4-inch strips into 4 by 4 inch squares. So you need 8 each one of these. Once you have done that, you're going to be marking and drawing diagonal lines from corner to corner twice on the back side of your F2 fabric. So let me do that. You may wanna, I usually use just pencil, but if you have erasable or disappearing marking pen, you can certainly do that as well. Once we have marked this one, we're gonna put right sides together on F2 and F3. And we're going to go and sew a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides of each line. Now, why do I say scant? You certainly could do a regular 1/4 inch seam allowance, but I have figured out that if you do a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance and your seams or stitching wasn't done exactly perfect, you have that little bit of extra leeway and still end up getting a perfect half square triangle. So let me go ahead and sew this one and I will be right back. Here I have sewn my seams already, if you can see. And you may have wondered, if I'm making half square triangles, why did I draw 2 lines and why did I sew on both sides of both lines? Well, this is because I have found out that it's faster way to making half square triangles. These 2 pieces actually will give us 8 half square triangles. They are just itty bitty, exactly what is needed for this project. So now that we have sewn on both sides of the 2 diagonal lines, we want to first cut this one from north to south and east to west. So we're going to be wanting to put our ruler 2-inch line on the edge, and we want to try to intersect our seam lines as much as possible. And let's do it the other way. Find our 2 inches. And here we go. And now even if they start traveling, we can cut them individually, or if we can, let's see if we can just cut it all at once. We're going to be now cutting on the sewn, on the drawn line. First this way, and then the other way. So you can see that we get 8 half square triangles. We want to press these ones towards the darker fabric, which is F3. And I have done it over here already. And now we're ready to trim. On the instructions, I have my illustration shows that my F2 is first this way. But I encourage you actually to do the other way. Especially, well, in this case, it doesn't matter, but many times it's easier, especially if you're working on a dark mat. It's easier for me to see this one on my second trimming. So we're trimming these ones to 1.5 inch square, and I like to put my diagonal dotted line on seam right here using the Tucker trimmer one. And so if you didn't sew a scant quarter inch seam allowance and you messed up your seam, you may not have enough to trim anything off to make it perfect perfect 1.5 inch unit. So I turned this unit 180 degrees. Now I have these cut lines, which I'm going to be putting it right on the edge. So I find that it's easier for me to see the edges, especially if my mat happens to be green or dark otherwise. And so once I'm pleased with this one, I will trim the last two sides. So you can get perfect 1.5 inch little half square triangle units. Now, one important thing is that you remember to switch your needle back to the regular 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sometimes I forget and then I pay for it later. So you will end up getting 64 of these unit Bs, which are 1.5 inch squares. On step 4, we're going to be sewing these half square triangles that we made on previous step, which are called unit Bs, onto 1.5 inch F2 strip as well as F5 strip. You do want to pay attention how you place them on this strip so that they are sewn correct way. So you basically want to have the diagonal going from Florida to Oregon and the F3 to be on pointing to Massachusetts and F2 pointing to California. Okay, I need to fix this one little thing. So I usually try to leave a little distance just in case my seam wasn't totally perfect. If you don't want to leave too much so that you will have enough fabric left over, or that there is enough fabric, but something like a little less than 1/8 of an inch is usually appropriate amount. So you would be sewing a regular 1/4 inch seam allowance over here, and then you would do the same thing to the other F5 strip. So let me go ahead and do that, and we'll continue in just a little bit. So now I have sewn them over here, and then we want to press them towards the half square triangles in both times. So that is important that you are pressing them in the correct way. After this one, we want to separate them. They will measure 1.5 by 2.5 inches. So what you want to do is you just use your ruler that has a marking on 1.25 right over here, and you want to make sure that there is no fabric overflow for the small square, so that the 1.5 inch line is right right on the edge of the half square unit, and you would be just separating them. See, first, so let me do just a couple. And then you would be turning them the other way so that you can clean up the other edge. And again, you will be wanting to line the 1.5 inch line on the cut edge. And so you keep doing this until you have all these done. You're going to have 32 of these, and then you're going to have 32 of these ones. And then next I'm going to show you what to do next. Once you have cut all the units and trimmed them, and you want to make a pile that has your unit C1s and unit C2s, and you want to make sure that the F3 fabric of the half square triangles is kind of kissing each other like this. Then you're going to be going back to your sewing machine. You're going to nest the seams. I think you can see that. And you want to sew regular 1/4 inch seam allowance from one end to the other end. Once you have done that, we're going to be spinning the seams. So what is spinning? You're just going to go over here, and you want to just open up that seam, excess seam, until the next seam allowance, and see how this side wants to go this way, this one goes to that way, so it's like a spinning. So you will have, once you press it, you will have unit D, and you're going to do these so that you will end up with 32 2.5 by 2.5 inch unit Ds. Next, you're going to take your F6 strip, which is 3 inches wide, and you're going to cut these when the strip is on fold. So let me clean up the edge over here just a second. I'm going to cut these into pairs that are 2.25 inches this way by 3 inches. Oopsie. Like so, and you will need altogether 16 pairs of these. Once you have got those, you can actually pile up several. You keep them in pairs so that either the right sides or wrong sides are together. But you could pile these ones up, up to 8 layers. And you're going to take your V-block trimmer, and you look at this thick line. Ignore the red one, I have been using that for something else. It says cut line for side triangles, and you want to line that one up on the very left edge, cut edge, and then on the bottom you want to line up the 2 inch finished unit line where it says cut strip 3 inches. This differs how the tool instructions call you to use it, but I find it's far less confusing and actually faster to make it this way. So you felt like I didn't get that edge. Okay, so you do like this, and remember every other piece is wrong side up, so I'm gonna just be separating them so I know which one is which way. Of course, with batiks it doesn't usually matter as much, but sometimes you can tell the difference. So now I have separated what I cut, and I will end up getting 32 ST1s and 32 ST2s. Okay, the next step, we're going to be using our 3-inch strips of F2 and F3. So let me first do the F2. And we want to line up at the bottom the 2-inch, let's see that you can see, 2-inch finished unit line. And then see this diagonal line, it says center triangle trim line. You want to make sure that that is at the kind of close to the corner of the edge bottom corner, and you want to make your first cut, and you want to turn the unit 180 degrees, and now you want to line up again the center triangle trim line on the cut edge, and then the 2-inch finished unit line at the bottom to get those beautiful center triangles. This one is CT1, and you need 16 of these. And here I'm going to cut CT2s from F3 fabric, and you will need 16 of these. Over here. Like so. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this. There's nothing wrong for you to cut one layer at a time and getting the sharp point, but it takes time, and the results in the end may not be exactly what you like. The accuracy may have been gone, at least some part of the time, if you were not totally careful cutting everything, stitching everything perfectly, and pressing everything perfectly. So I want to show you a method that you could get these center triangles cut much faster, and they will become a little bit oversized, allowing you to make slight mistakes, but in the end coming up with the better results. So instead of getting a very sharp point over here, we want to get a little flat top. And let me see if I can zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. Let's see. Okay, I think that's good. So again, we would be lining up the 2-inch finished unit line on the bottom, but instead of lining up the center triangle trim line exactly on the cut edge, we want to be about 1/8 of an inch away from the cut edge with that line, making the unit slightly larger. So then when we cut it, see, we're going to have a little flat top at the top. It just gives us a little bit extra to work on, especially if we're cutting many layers at once. So usually, let's say that this one was the sharp edge, which it is not now, but let me show you how I would, and on the instructions, it would be saying for you to do this ST1s and start sewing those things together. So it basically asks you to, on the instructions, organize all your 3 units, the ST1, CT1, and which is the center triangle one, as well as the ST2s, like this. So if we were sewing with the sharp point, with the regular way, we would be just starting and sewing these together. And we could go and do all of them at once, and then we would be pressing them and then attaching and doing the second ST2s. And many times what you will find out is that your angle lost, or you lost the angle just because either this one wasn't cut correctly or your seams were just a tad off what they were supposed to be. So my recommendation is to get things cut faster and end result being better is to do a little flat top over here and do ST2s first, so the right side, and you can pile them up high. So these, which I have done right over here, and once you have done that, you're going to turn the unit wrong side up, and now you want to place your center triangle trim line on the seam, and you're kind of placing the ruler so that you're gonna hit and split that flat top on the top left hand corner. So this may take a little bit of adjustment, but remember, if you cut about a eighth of an inch extra, meaning the flat top was about an eighth of an inch, you're going to take away about an eighth of an inch. So that might be just perfect, and it was. And this can tell me that actually my seam was pretty darn good over here. But now you are left with this unit, and when you're starting to do the second triangle, side triangle over here, your angle is 100% perfect. Now what you would do is what I should have told you before. So let me go back over here. When you started to do this, you want to place the points together, and the sharp point of the side triangle should be going to the corner on the right hand side, and you want to be sewing it from the center triangle up. So when you have done that, you do the other one, and again you want to place the side triangle so that the points match, and you want to again sew the center triangle on top. Let's take a look at, I had one piece that I had done the sharp point over here. Let's see how accurate this one was. Well, actually, what I can do is I can try to put the seam right over here. Looking at here, I'm a little bit off, and it's hard for you to tell, and it's very hard if I have done this way, sewing the left side first. So but looking at it, so if you have done all of them this way and your angle is way off, you can make minor corrections at this point, but there's not enough room to make major corrections because you won't have enough fabric. But if you can tell, you know, my piece that was cut at the sharp point, I'm off a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit. But starting now, I would be doing this other side triangle. And at this point, it really doesn't matter which way you had done, because if your last seam is not good, the end result won't be good either. So, so if you wanna do the flat top method, which is not explained on the instructions, but I'm kind of trying to explain over here, always then sew the right side triangle in first, making sure that you're sewing it with the center triangle on top. Then you want to press it towards the side triangle, turn it wrong side up, bring your ruler or tool and try to line it up as perfectly as possible on top of the seam. Now, if you're off a little bit, make sure that you're right on mark right here and right here. What happens in the middle, nobody's going to be able to tell you. But we do need to get rid of that flat top, like so. And now we would be good to go and sew the second seam. I hope I didn't confuse you more, but you can choose which method you want to go with. But know if you're making the sharp points like the instructions tell you, you may end up having some variances at your, once you have sewn both sides, the unit will not line up perfectly always. So let me go and sew some more of the second triangles on, side triangles on, and we'll continue right after that. So now let's go to trimming. No matter which way you end up getting your V-block done, it's time to trim. And to get started, you're gonna make the unit so that it shows V towards you. I like to always trim from the back side of the unit, and then you take your V-block trimmer. We use this side to get it started, but for trimming we're going to use the other side. So you turn your tool 180 degrees and you're going to place the lines that are at the bottom intersection of the seams. It's 2, and then the seams should be aligning with this kind of a diagonal lines. Something else to consider is that you should have excess fabric beyond the 2.5 inch lines over here, as well as outside of the ruler. So if all is good, you can cut, but let me back down a little bit. If your tool is not lining up nicely within the seam, what is most important is that your seam is aligned right here, 1/4 inch away from the ruler, as well as over here and right over here. Those are your critical points. So if your seams are not aligning in there, you may want to choose to do the flat top method that I showed you. I think you're going to have a better success with that one. And just be very careful when sewing the second seam, and always remember to trim off the flat top while at the same time you're making the angle perfect. So I just trimmed the first 2 sides. So now I turn the unit 180 degrees and I'm going to line up the cut edges with 2.5 inch lines. And then I will also pay attention that my seam intersections are exactly on that X. And if I'm happy with the placement, I can do and trim my last two sides. So here I have a perfect unit E1. And let me show you also, since this one has a better visibility to the seams, how to do the trimming of a unit E2. It's basically exactly the same way. You just might be able to see it slightly better, how the seam should nicely align with these diagonal lines. And yeah, I might be just a tad off. And hold on to your ruler really well so that it doesn't start moving when you're trimming. So here I got my first two. Turn the unit 180 degrees. Line up with the 2.5 inch lines as well as that X mark over there. Like so. So here is my perfect unit E2. Finally, you want to arrange your units in a way that the block will be constructed. So here in the middle, we have unit A. On the corners, we have unit Ds. From the top and the bottom, we have unit E1s. And on the sides, we have unit Es. You want to start sewing them, these units, into rows. So sewing these together, and these together. You're pressing the middle towards the center, and the top and the bottom, you're going to be pressing it away from the center. Once you have them into rows, you want to sew those rows together. So this row over here to here, and then this row attaching it to this one. And we're going to be pressing it towards the center. You will be repeating this one for 8 block J's that will measure in the end 6.5 by 6.5 inch. Until next time, bye-bye.